call the meeting to order. First thing on the agenda for our work session is our presentation by SSC.
Chairman Quindon, turn this over to Val Emery. SSC's here as part of just a update as promised when we went through the bid process last year. So an update on summer transition and first quarter for custodial services. I'll turn it over to Val Emery.
Thanks a lot. Good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. I think I turned this on. There we go. Thanks for your time this evening. As Dr. Robertson said, I wanted to share some information with you guys this evening around the transition. Also around some data from our first quarter. Just to refresh, you guys are well aware of our organizational structure. We broke this out by learning community with unit directors responsible for each, and in some cases, multiple unit directors. We've got some transition going on in the Rock Point area that I will share with you later. But additionally, the items not on this list are 3 bench unit directors that we train on site so that if we have any anticipated transition, we'd be prepared for it with folks that are already in the pipeline. Some of our transitional highlights. As you well know, we started this conversation, feels like a while ago. In April, our bench and startup and transition team was on site once we got the approval to go live. We put all of our processes and procedures in place during that time. I'm proud to say that with the folks that transitioned, we had about 93% of the current staff transition. We were able to train them not only on processes and procedures, but new equipment that we brought in. That resulted in some really good work quality from the individuals during summer clean. Some of our challenges that we faced, increased supplies due to COVID and the COVID protocol. Justin and I have talked pretty regularly about the amount of soap and paper towels used, especially at the elementary level. The good thing is we heard some anecdotal reports of supplies being out. The reality was the employees just did not put them out. So that results in a training issue and an accountability issue, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. One of our other challenges was just familiarizing ourselves and the on-site team with all new management to the community, to the culture, to the players, and to the folks in the school. I think we've got a really good start being in the first quarter. Got a lot of good feedback as I've been visiting schools and talking to principals and teachers. Equipment, we experienced some of the supply chain issues that you turn on the TV and see. The good point is because of our network, we were able to get equipment in, and you guys not experience the fact that we didn't have it. So that was more of a behind the scenes stub your toe, if you will. And then we did experience a delay in the fingerprint process. As you well know, everybody is fingerprinted to work for the district. Those that transitioned, it took us a little while longer to sort out who was who and run that process through. As an aside, now that folks are hopefully starting to come back to work, there is a backlog in the fingerprint process of about 2 weeks. So that's beyond our control, but we're still pushing the best we can. As I shared with you, 93% of the associates that were here transitioned. As you know, there's nothing like institutional knowledge, so we're very appreciative of that. We had all of our management before go live, and while that may seem like not a big deal, to have the team on the ground from day one, that was pretty impressive for us, and thank you for your support in helping that happen. Delivered all equipment to the sites. I don't know how much you're aware, but our predecessors, despite being told that they would leave equipment and supplies, or supplies specifically, literally pulled everything out of every dispenser. So, a bit of a scramble day one, but we were able to recover. And then our electronic logbook was in, as we promised, day one. I'll share some data on that as we move forward. Before we get into the data, I want to talk about the levels of communication that we have. Our weekly check-ins, Shimshon, who's our resident district manager, does weekly rounds along with the unit directors with each building designee. May not always be the principal, but each building does have someone that we round with. That's typically followed up with an email to just say, hey, here's what we talked about, and here's our plan to fix or move forward. Our electronic logbook, which is a real-time database. If the designee has an issue, a work order, if you will, that information comes real-time to the team so that we can respond. Our time frame is 2 hours to respond, 24 hours for an action plan. And then finally, our principal and teacher surveys. First survey went out October 6th. We are not receiving as many responses as we would like, so after talking with Dr. Robertson, we're going to actually send this out to all teachers and building users. That survey is sent out the first of every month and can be filled out throughout the month. Really quickly, some data from the logbook. Not a lot. I mentioned that earlier. We've had about 50 work orders since the inception of school. And as you can see, from August to October, the requests have actually declined. I would ask that you share with your principals and teachers to continue to fill this out. We use this data to track and trend, retrain, and do all of those types of things. This isn't about a gotcha moment. This is so that we can make decisions based on data.
Our screens are blinking in and on and off. Can you go back to that slide, please? We're stable now.
We're stable now.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Glad we went back. One thing to note on here, the schools that you see listed are the only schools that actually filled out information for the logbook. So again, this is not a gotcha, but please encourage folks to utilize the tool. Clean Intelligent is our introspective look at our quality assurance process. I can break the information out many, many ways, but for the sake of this meeting, I broke it out by learning community. We finished in this first quarter well over 400 inspections. These inspections are done by our unit directors to validate the work that's done by our custodians. As you can see, Rock Point has the lowest response from our unit director, and as I mentioned before, this is a requirement that resulted a change from us. We had to make a move in management there. That also is an area that started to bubble up on us, so it's a direct correlation to inspections not being done and people not being held accountable. The other thing is per contract, we should be at APA 2. This graph has us at right at APA 2.5. Keep in mind that this is an introspective look, so we should be grading ourselves a bit harder. While I'll account for some timing on this and the fact that we came off of summer break, my expectation is that our team is actively out looking for things to fix. So in reports to come, you should see some of this moving up in terms of higher APA score. Bit of a staffing update. About 26 vacancies in custodial. That's across the board. That's every learning community. We can't seem to get past the 30 mark. On average, we bring in about 30. We onboard about 30 people a month. But for whatever reason, whether it be the job wasn't for them, didn't like the job, wasn't what they expected, we've had some turnover. We continue to constantly recruit hourly employees. We've also got a pretty robust retention and recruiting mechanism that I'll share with you shortly, but about 26 is good for us. Out of the total number of schools, that shows about 56 schools that are fully staffed. Now, with that being said, that's fully staffed if everybody showed up. We know how that goes. On average, about 18 folks call in a day for one reason or the other. Shimshon and I were talking today. Ideally, we'd like to get to the point where we can start building a sub pool. We are able to do that in some schools specifically, but just not across the board yet. But we'll get there. And then from a grounds perspective, 7 vacancies. While that represents a bit of a quarter, I'm pretty pleased with the work that City Green is doing. They've,
Hey Sherry, our screens are now, yeah, they just keep blinking.
can you see this one when we go back, or let me wait here?
We saw
We saw the staffing.
Yeah, we saw that.
Oh, right there.
You can go to the next one now.
We're good, Val.
You good? Okay. Some of our recruiting efforts, a few of these is pretty specific to Hamilton, but I want to highlight a couple up at the top. The way this process works is we refresh our requisitions every 30 days. That keeps them to the top of job boards.
Yeah.
They're all,
Hey, it's the Velcro, people, okay?
there's Velcro.
We
Yours
didn't-
are fine.
We didn't budget for the nice little slide thing, okay?
Yeah.
We reduced the cost around.
Are y'all's out?
Yeah,
Yeah, everything's out.
It says no signal, check cable connection.
I don't know what Velcro is.
It's holding the thing down there.
The-
Whatever it is,
power
is being
box.
held by Velcro, okay? You know, like Velcro shoes.
We couldn't afford the duct tape?
We use the last one on your mouth.
Good thing is I'm almost done, so.
So yeah, that's what's going on. Technically,
The other thing is, I'm gonna send it to you all by email.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's falling off.
That's fine, that should be fine though, because it doesn't affect these.
We keep going, and if some highlight comes up, Sherry will send us.
They're gonna send us
info.
Dr. Robertson's gonna send us the emailed copy, so we'll be able to pull it up. Just one second.
All I did was press the button. I promise it wasn't me.
Yeah, you should have.
You've done a fine job.
Thank you.
I've already sent it.
Gotcha.
Somebody got it, yeah.
Can you guys see it? Oh, you. wait,
We're- yeah,
open it up.
we don't have it all. There we go.
okay.
Now we have like 6 copies, so we should be okay.
Good. Hey, Sherry. Come here. I have no idea what just popped up on my thing. Recruiting efforts.
That's right.
Recruiting efforts. One important thing to note on here is that we have a full-time recruiter in our office on Dobbs. That's all this young lady does is mines for applicants and goes out and looks for employees. We found early on that we were having some trouble staffing the mountain. Predecessors had a shuttle that they would bus folks up there. That's a huge liability that we really didn't want to take part in. We got a bit creative, and instead of paying $13 an hour to go up, we're paying $14.50 plus a $50 gas stipend a week. That has turned out to work out very well for us. Additionally, instead of using temp services, we employ our own temp workers. That's a 90-day position for a specific duty, and we're paying that job $18 an hour. So you may hear some rumblings from your folks that we're hiring folks in at a higher rate, but that job is no benefits, specific role. If they want full-time work, we'll gladly put them in full-time work. So just so you understand what that's about. Same-day pay, I'm pretty proud of that. Every hourly employee and management employee, for that fact, is able to withdraw within 24 hours up to 50% of their current wages. That's been a big recruiting effort for us. I know you see out in the public some folks doing 100%, but we want to be sure to account for taxes, and if there are other things out there on folks' checks, we don't want them to go the wrong way. Work and Win incentive is a hourly incentive for perfect attendance. Proud to say that we've had 20 or so folks over the last 2 months that have received that, and it's a cash award. We pay all the taxes. We want you to come to work. You're our service hero, if you will. A lot of growth opportunities we've been able to share with folks, whether it's up the road in Cleveland or across the nation. We've had some folks take advantage of the upward mobility. So all of these things are things that we're talking about. Perk Spot is one of my favorites. Compass, our parent company, has business with a lot of folks, General Motors, Ford, Home Depot, Lowe's. If you recall, I talked a bit about it in our presentation. Our employees have that same benefit at no additional cost. So we've been able to talk up some of that and attribute that to some success with recruiting. And then finally, we'll end it with some pictures of a few of our Work and Win recipients and a few of our GEM awards, Great Employees Making Magic. This is strictly a service line award for performing your job and going above and beyond and recognized by the folks that you're working with. So with that, take some questions.
Any questions? Mr. Perez. Yeah, it's up there. You're good.
Just say, where's my?
So I guess I'm a lot of the Rock Point, and one, I appreciate your action on that, because I was getting mixed results when I would ask about how our services were going. When should, if I ask again, should I be able to get better results if I ask all our principals?
I think you should be seeing them now.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if I follow up,
Yeah.
good.
Shimshan is rounding.
And to be
for-
clear, just let me say something, because as I said that, it's not all the schools
Sure,
that I
I
heard
get
that
it.
from, so I just want to be clear about that. Some actually told me the opposite, that they had an incredible experience, and I want to say that, but some had a very poor experience, and I wanted to make sure that we correct that as well.
I appreciate that. We're in the business of finding the problem, though, so I get it. Didn't take it any other way than how it was intended. And that was one of the reasons you hired us to do a job and to hold folks accountable. And I came down and walked some schools with Dr. Robinson and Shimshan and the team, and there was a change that needed to be made, and we did it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Thurman.
Yes, I just think I think it's genius about paying people that are loyal employees and show up for work. I think that's a really good incentive to get people to show up, and I just think that's a very good thing.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else? Yeah, I'm just going to echo that. One thing that I've seen is adjustment, accountability, and creativity on y'all's part. And I think that shows that you're wanting to be accountable and want to be held accountable. And that's what we ask, and that the job gets done and our classrooms get clean. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Oh, Dr. Robertson.
So I wanted to point out a couple things that we're working with SSC to kind of retrain our people on. Number one, Connect and the lack of responses there. And just to be clear, what that is so if there's a deficiency, they can put a work order in and there's a 24-hour turnaround. And so we've got to really train our people to make sure that they're putting that information in there. The second one, to kind of close the communication loop, is on that survey. We didn't do a great job on the first one on our end, communicating how that needed to go out to teachers. And so what we're going to do moving forward after speaking today is give them a list of employee emails so they can just send it directly to teachers, and then they'll have all month to respond to it. So Connect is not meant for everyone to get on. It's simply a work order. We need this turned around and corrected, and then the survey will be another communication loop to get feedback.
One more question.
Mr. President.
On the staffing update, when you've got the three positions, staffing goal, transitions, and vacancies, those are current vacancies, and so I'm looking at almost, about 40% vacancies on the grounds, if your staffing goal is 20. I can't imagine that having, functioning at 60% staffing for the grounds, we're actually meeting the goals. So can you kind of?
Sure. We're actually in the downward side of the ground season. So that vacancy rate will actually go up slightly.
Okay, okay, that's helpful.
It's seasonal work.
Yeah.
But the thing
Okay.
that we've worked out with City Green is those employees that want to come over to the custodial side and work, we'll keep them whole and have them work as well. So
All right.
hopefully we can share some news on that later.
All good. Thank you, Val.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we'll be moving on to our discussion of the agenda. We'll not be changing the agenda for this, but we are going to go ahead and let Ms. Murray do her employee benefit recommendations. We have some visitors that are here to speak on that, and we will be talking about that in our administrative board matters for the insurance recommendations. So, Ms.
All
Murray.
right, thank you, Chairman McClendon and members of the board. Today I want to introduce with us today from Russ Blakely and Associates, Brent Wick and Austin Jett, and then from 1-to-1, Ashley Berry, Dr. Keith Helton, and David Kinsler. And so first to come up, I'm going to ask Brent and Austin to share some information. So to kind of start out, Brent, if you'll move to the next slide. Just a reminder in regards to our benefit plans and our why. We want to recruit and retain top talent, and then we want to have those competitive total rewards. And then in looking at our initiatives going forward as a district, we look to partner with experts to evaluate our current benefit plan, issuing those RFPs for our current benefit programs, and ensuring that we're providing the best benefits to our employees, as well as accomplishing our wellness initiatives. So you may ask, why have we started working with a benefits broker? Market knowledge, and you'll see today the difference that that has made. And helping us with employee communication, you're going to see a difference this year with open enrollment, and we'll talk about that as well. Wellness strategy development, and then they also have great insurance company relationships, and they can also help us with forecasting and budgeting. So I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
Great. Well, thank you. We're kind of going to dive into a lot of the work that's been done and just kind of highlight what the intent was, what we've tried to accomplish, and answer any questions you may have. So we started out looking at what RFPs needed to be done and what opportunities there would potentially were. This started back even prior to us working with the Department of Education with the pharmacy back in July. And then we picked up and have done the dental RFP, looking at better alternatives for the dental plan, also looking at long-term, short-term disability, as well as life insurance. And then we also looked at potential alternatives for the voluntary products that are offered and have been offered to employees. And so the results of that is what we're going to go over. Kind of the important things to think about why to look at these items on a consistent basis. One is just market changes, competitiveness. It's kind of like life and disability. As we started working with the schools, we felt like there was an opportunity for financial savings. And so there's the financial aspect, but there's also just being competitive from an employee retention and making sure that benefits are current. A lot changes within the insurance world on a regular basis with products, and so making sure that what's offered is the best that can be offered in the marketplace. So looking at the dental plan first, which is really was the first project that we started. The goal of this as we talked with the team here at the Department of Education, was how do we make this simpler, easier for employees to access their benefit, limit their out-of-pocket expenses up front so they weren't having to pay for everything and get reimbursed, and really trying to make sure that the dollars that were being spent maximize the benefit that they got. So kind of looking at it from a cost, benefit, and simplicity perspective. In this process, we issued a formal RFP. There were 5 companies that responded: Cigna Blue Cross, the Standard, MetLife, and Delta Dental. what we were looking at is cost, benefit, and network access. And it's a combination of those, you know, who met the best objectives within all of those. And so the recommendation is Cigna. And we would be moving from today, that is a reimbursement plan. And so it's a fluctuating budget item. This would be an insurance plan, so it's a budgetable item, same cost on a regular basis. And so it also is budget neutral from what's being spent today. Looking at it from a network perspective, which is one way we limit the amount of dollars employees are having to spend on the out-of-pocket up front. The Cigna Dental Network is robust and very competitive. So that's was the recommendation. Some additional details around dental, and the objective was also to provide some choice to employees. So currently employees have a $1,000 benefit. The goal was to add a second option that employees could pay for if they wanted to buy up, pay the difference between those two plans, so that they would have a richer benefit if they wanted. So instead of having $1,000 per person in benefit, they could have $1,500 per person. And provided just, I won't read it, but just some of the details of the side of the current and what the recommendation and benefits are. A couple of key points. So there is a network, but that doesn't mean employees have to go to a network dentist. They can go to any dentist they want. The benefit's the same whether they go in or out of network. In network, those providers have agreed to file the claim for the employee and collect what the employee owes instead of the full amount. So that's the opportunity to help employees save, and based on other clients we work with that are with Cigna in Chattanooga, we would expect at least 75% of folks to be able to utilize a network dentist, if not more. So the second RFP that we did was the long-term, short-term disability and life insurance. This is one that's kind of it's an opportunity from a cost perspective, making sure the plans are competitive in the market, and really where we saw an opportunity for the schools to actually save money. So we did issue a formal RFP for these lines of coverage. The standard is currently the insurance company that provides these benefits, and we had 8 responders to the RFP. Really, 2 things we were focused on here is matching current benefits and the cost. And in doing that, Symetra was actually the company that had the best proposal and benefits to line up with that. Symetra does have they are a partner of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, so they do have some local ties as well. But the savings in looking at just the life insurance, so this is same benefit being offered, matching currently what they have, is a almost $25,000 savings annually. And in addition, this is guaranteed for 4 years in the employee portion of life insurance. So employees have the option to buy additional life insurance. That cost doesn't change, but it's guaranteed for 4 years. And then we looked at the long-term and short-term disability, which is where we saw significant savings. So the same companies provided proposals for these products. The long-term disability also was recommended to be Symetra for long-term and short-term disability. On the long-term disability, the savings is $159,000 annually. For the short-term disability that's paid for by the schools, the savings is $470,000 on an annual basis. And then the employees actually have the option of buying some additional short-term disability benefit, and the cost for that is going to also go down by $42,000, which on a percentage basis, that's a 35% reduction to the employees in what's coming out of their pocket. So pretty significant savings. With life disability insurance, there's not a lot of change that has to happen to the employees. That's more on the administrative side. We're not taking anything away. There's some benefit enhancements as far as the life insurance they'll be able to buy and not have to answer medical questions. So there are some benefits along the way for employees as well with the change. So I'm going to have Austin Jett from RVA come up and just go through the voluntary benefits with you real quick as well.
Thank you, Brett. Good evening, everybody. I'm Austin Jett from Russ Blakely & Associates. Thanks for having us here. just gonna do a quick review of the voluntary thing. So a couple of things are gonna recur over these next few slides here, and that's what when we're approaching the voluntary benefits, we're looking at a few different things. Cost of the benefits to the employees, right? So teachers and other staff, the benefits themselves, and then ease of enrollment and administration. So this is something that where the short-term and the long-term disability, it's sort of just plug and play administratively. There's some other things that we needed to think about as we go through this. We want it to work well for the staff here, but also from the standpoint of employees being able to enroll at open enrollment and also new hires. Interestingly enough, as we go through this as well, with the cost of the savings that we've been talking about here and that we'll review at the end, the voluntary benefits, these moves are actually going to bring around $200,000 of savings to the Department of Education and additional savings forms by moving the voluntary benefits as well. So we'll talk about that in a second. So for the voluntary individual life insurance, so think about this like life insurance that when the employees purchase, they lock in that rate forever. Right? So this is more designed to be taken with them if they choose. It's going to save around 40% for employees over what is currently in place. And it's a $100,000 guaranteed issue offering. So every single employee, when we roll these benefits out, is going to be able, no questions asked, to buy up to $100,000 of life insurance that won't go up. It's not exactly the same as the traditional, has a cash value. It's less expensive because it doesn't have a lot of the premium dollars tied up in cash value. It's just a steady rate life insurance that they can take with them when they quit working here as well. So we had a few different respond. Allstate floated to the top on that. They just, quite frankly, do that benefit better than anybody. With the voluntary accident insurance, we had a lot of respondents. Allstate won that one with premium savings of 50% or more for employees. On some of these savings numbers, they're going to look noteworthy, maybe even gaudy. And the reason for that is in the last several years, a lot of different companies have gotten into the voluntary benefits space. So they brought competitiveness. It's pushed the prices down and the value of the benefits up. So, you know, we were able to sort of take advantage of that. A more competitive marketplace for these benefits than had been in place in the past. For the voluntary critical illness and hospital insurance, Symetra was the one who rose to the top on here with premium savings of 30 to 60% for employees. And by packaging with Symetra, we were able to further reduce the long-term disability rates that the Board of Education is paying as well. So noted in Brent's benefits there. With that, I'll hand it back over to Brent.
Yeah, so just as far as process, so the changes, these changes would take place in a couple of different phases. So the dental, the life insurance, and the long-term and short-term disability would all take place January 1st of 2022. And then the voluntary products would actually change. So that's the critical illness, the life insurance, hospital indemnity and accident coverage would change March 1st. And that's just from a administrative process, trying to make it simple and not have too much to try to deal with, and in the same process give employees a chance to truly evaluate what they have and what they're doing and communicate it effectively. In this process, one of the key things is we looked at voluntary benefits and as well as from a life and disability is simplicity and creating a world where employees can make their selections on their own. They'll actually be able to pick these benefits online. They don't have to meet with anybody one-on-one and sit down. It's more just making it simple for employees to choose those benefits if they want to have them or not, by simply marking what they want when they go through their online enrollment process. So I'm going to turn it over to One-to-One Health, and Dr. Helton is here, as well as David Kinsler, and Ashley Berry is their clinical operations manager, and she's going to go through some of the additional wellness programs and all that have been taken a little bit the next step further.
Good afternoon. We get the pleasure of taking care of your employees at 3 different clinic locations across the county. One of those is here at Hickory Valley behind the office, one in Hickson and one on Riverfront Parkway. So we have the locations spread out where it's convenient for employees. We have walk-in hours. Get closer, sorry. We have walk-in hours as well as scheduled appointments so that we can meet folks' needs when they arise. So obviously we worked on reducing total medical spend through our clinics, and all of the services that we provide are at no cost to the employees. And I'm sorry, I probably should be moving the presentation as we go. So we've definitely seen growth within our clinics. We have, engagement has increased over 24% this year. Clinic utilization has increased over 74% with 1,001 new patients just this far into this year, and a total of 8,325 visits year to date within our 3 clinics. Because of the increased utilization, we're anticipating adding a second provider at Hickory Valley in October, a second one in Hickson in December, and then also a second provider in Riverfront in February. So that's awesome. Very timely that your employees have access to telehealth. So through COVID, we've been able to take care of employees 24/7 with telehealth. We've served over 630 employees this year alone in telehealth, and also timely with COVID was behavioral health services. We've serviced over 180 employees through behavioral health. Both of these programs are accessed remotely at the convenience of the patients, whether it be at home, office, or in the clinic as well. And then we have on-site pharmacies in a couple of our clinics. Hickson and Hickory Valley both have on-site pharmacies, and so we partner with them to drive our patients there to get their medication refills, which again just kind of helps the total medical spend all the way around. So some of the things to talk about for wellness and future wellness initiatives that we're working on. We are establishing a wellness committee and have our first meeting coming up, really to kind of have a diverse group of employees to speak to about wellness, to hear from the employees themselves on what motivates them, what incentives would they like to see, and then we can help drive and promote wellness initiatives through that group of people who can go into their schools and communities and support and promote those activities with the larger group. And then also just some outreach on different benefits and wellness things that we've worked on this year. Definitely increased lots of marketing efforts to educate employees about the benefits, getting the word out to employees so they know what's open to them and that they have 24 access to telehealth. We revamped the entire website that the employees go to, so it's definitely very user-friendly. They can quickly see where to go to schedule an appointment, access their medical records online, held Mammo Bus so that patients could have mammograms on site September 21st through the 30th. We've done lots of flu vaccination clinics, visited over 25 schools and gone in and vaccinated staff. And then throughout the course of the year, we've held multiple COVID vaccination events so that employees could get vaccines in a super convenient setting without wait times to really just, again, encourage and promote the overall health of your employees. We also offer health coaching and virtual fitness classes as part of our wellness offerings to your employees.
And just so you are aware, open enrollment begins October the 25th, and it's going to run through November the 12th this year. We're going to be hosting meetings, and Deborah Smith is our benefits manager, and she's here. She's waving to you. So you'll see her a lot out and about. We're going to have in-person and Zoom meetings, and then one-to-one, like individual meetings if folks have additional questions as we go along. Future initiatives. We're committed to continuing to review these benefit plans, providing competitive total rewards for our employees. We want to increase the opportunities for clinic access to drive early intervention of chronic medical conditions. We also want to launch additional wellness activities and reduce healthcare costs with improved outcomes. And then finally, just in summary, our partnerships and deferring to expertise is obviously making an impact. Utilizing our benefit brokers with Russ Blakely and Health Strategies has not only saved the district money, but also improved the benefits that we're offering to our employees. So we're going to continue the utilization of our clinics and our pharmacies to grow and have more employees relying on those services. Any questions?
Any questions? I think we're good. Thank you all so much. Okay, we will move into our agenda for this Thursday's meeting. We'll start, no executive session. We'll have the pledge to the flag by Mr. Corey of East Ridge Elementary School. Then we'll go into our exemplars of excellence with our national merit finalist and our girls nation president, which has a relation to a board member.
Does she have to disclose that before we vote on it?
And then we will go into our presentations. We are going to make one change to the agenda here, just for streamline things. 11C, which is curriculum/classroom text and books clarification requests by Chairman McClendon and Ms. Thurman. We're going to move that under Future Ready 2023 with Dr. Parker, just so there will be some streamlining that process and questions can be answered there, because some of that will be covered in our presentation. And then we'll have our delegations, and then we'll move down to the consent agenda. Anything in the approval of the minutes or field trips? Nope. Okay. Anything in bids, contracts under Chief Financial Officer?
Yes.
Mr. Prez.
Zendesk Suite. I know Zendesk from when there was a big competition between suites. And so my concern, perhaps, and maybe you can clarify, we've got Google Suite, we've got Microsoft Exchange, and now we're adding Zendesk, or we have Zendesk, we've had Zendesk, and is there something this suite does that we need to pay for that the others don't do, or are we struggling with transitioning to using some of the suites that we've chosen?
So I think that this particular software is around our help desk. Our what we're using is the modern. I'm not familiar with Zendesk and all that they offer, but the Google suite of products and like Canvas, those are more outward-facing learning management for students. This is actually for our internal help desk support. And what we've been using was a product where we have free access, but it really limits the number of people who can submit tickets and how we're able to organize those response to tickets. And then we also want to create a knowledge base so that there can be some self-troubleshooting for users. So it's my understanding that we actually don't have a help desk suite customer response platform in our district right now. So this is to solve for that, so that we can get a better help desk with the number of computers that we've added in the 10,000 range. We're getting a lot more incoming, and we need a better way to try to track and monitor that customer service response.
And it's more likely that they have specialized because they started losing the war on suites, right? But I guess, maybe there's a more broad and general concern, but there's always another suite. There's always another, and each time we sign contracts, they add to our costs when perhaps some of our own suites or some of our own software that we have already contracted with can be utilized. I know that regarding Google, that at times, even from teachers I've heard, they prefer the Google part of it. Is just that they, some know how to use some part of it better than others, and they understand that this can be used, versus Canvas or whatever. So again, I won't question that. Somebody did the research. I know somebody did the work, and this will play value. I have this bigger concern that we can always add more software, right? There's always somebody out there selling something that's so niche that they can say, hey, let's use us, and this will solve this problem, when we've already got software that we're paying for that could possibly do the same work for us. So.
And let me say this, I'm going to say this for Mary Ellen's benefit. I think you're exactly right. We've had that conversation about Zoom versus Teams.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we have access to Microsoft Teams. It will do pretty much the same thing that Zoom will do. I think in the beginning of the pandemic, people got used to Zoom. Yes, people don't like it. Even over here, they're like, I don't want Teams. But I'm like, those of us who know how to, it will really do essentially the same things. But we are paying for Zoom, even though we have Microsoft Teams. So we're trying to evaluate that. I think your point is well made are there redundancies?
Yeah.
And we are trying to also balance, trying to make sure that we don't create too much of a user limitation, right? That there are preferences that people have,
Yeah.
and if it's going to create a barrier for them to do their work, is it worth the incremental cost?
Yeah.
If we can afford it.
And it's a tough balance, and yeah, anyway, so thank you. That's kind of the bigger question to me is yeah, we just have to keep an eye on that.
Anything else under Chief Financial Officer?
Yes, I had a couple questions about the budget amendments. One is for 14.201 Learning Camps budget. I was actually just more curious about this. Is this actually our Summer Reach program? Okay, great. And so, pull it up real quick. Like I see that there's a carryover. Like it says at the top, fiscal year 21 stream mini camp elementary carryover. Does that mean that it's funds from the last school year budget being carried over?
Right.
Is that what that simply means? Okay.
Starts in July. So
Okay.
that's part of it.
And this program continues to be covered under ESSER dollars?
Yeah, I think there was split funding for both the state and federal.
Okay, great. Did we also give it new names? Like it says like stream, mini camp, bridge camp, summer. Is that new names? Or I'm just curious.
Neil, do you want to speak to that?
I'm actually just wondering, like, is there something changing?
So we do have some blended funds where, like, for instance, in our literacy work, we have the Literacy Improvement Network. We are working under a federal grant that we'll receive. And so we've had to blend funds, and some of it is literally just like what we call it, like a bridge camp. That is more state funding and this type of programming that the new law requires. So when we actually push it through here, it has to match what the federal dollars say.
Yeah.
And so if it's bridge, it came from the state funding specifically for this specific, I hope that makes sense. The way it's labeled here, for our general public, we call it all reach because that's just easy for families to understand. But when it comes to the details of our funding and how it goes through this process, we have to call it out specifically as to what it was, how it was funded.
And with this funding, especially with the carryover over dollars, are we anticipating doing anything different as far as like the scheduling or the number of weeks that it was offered this past year for this coming year? Or are we going to model it very similar? Are we going to try to go bigger, go smaller?
It's actually, can you hear me okay? It's actually bigger.
Great.
We will offer more, and we will also offer, we're really trying to be more school-based in what the school means, but we're also trying to be, like you'll see Thursday night, where we're also trying to be very intentional around, say, literacy and math.
Yep.
So there's a variety of things we're trying to offer. We also applied for a grant so that we could be very tightly aligned in certain schools with a community partner. So I hope you'll see when we present on Thursday, there's a lot of different lanes, but we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. And ultimately, that is to meet what the school desires for the kids that they serve.
Great. Whenever you say more, we're going to do more, do you think that you're going to have more school sites?
That, plus we also started earlier. We were able to kick off our STEP program, which is during school time, early September. Our goal was to try to launch where schools were ready right after Labor Day. And so we've had some schools in session. As soon as they were ready, we got rolling. So as far as more, there was a time last year that we didn't even get started until after Christmas. And so there's definitely more time, there's been more planning, and then we'll also get to carry that over into the summer.
Well, I do know that actually there were no spots available at a number of school sites. So that's why I asked if we'll maybe have more sites. But either way, I think it's just a phenomenal program. I feel like it's a silver lining of COVID that we've been, pushed to have this program, but such a phenomenal program. My son went through it I'm sending both of my boys this summer, whether they like it or not. But it's just great, and I'm glad to see us already talking about it so early.
And let me say this, we were actually just talking about this. It wasn't that, what happened last year is that we had to stop taking applications for planning purposes, right? We got to the point where when we start on June 7th, we started saying to families, hey, it's May 30th and we really can't accept anymore.
Yeah.
We're gonna start earlier this year promoting it.
Okay.
And we will probably still have to close the application cycle because otherwise we can't plan. So
That makes sense, yeah.
hopefully more families this year will key into it, feel more comfortable, and go ahead and sign up, because I think it was not so much that we couldn't accommodate them space-wise, it was that it got to be for planning purposes.
Got
We
it.
couldn't accept anymore.
That makes a lot of sense, and you're right. I had a lot of families tell me, oh, I didn't really think that was something that I wanted my children to go to, but now I'm trying to get them in and I can't. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense. So, cool. Okay, great. Thank you. The only other thing I wanted to talk about is item number 17.237, Safe Schools. I just wanted to better understand this. Is this funding, like, it looks like there's carryover funding as well, and then there's also the 2022 budget of 672. Is there anything new with this item that we should be aware of?
So there's some changes to where the money's going. If you remember back to the SRO conversation, we had some money in this that was going towards SRO. That's been kind of shifted to SSOs.
Okay.
Part of the carryover is through, if you remember 3 or 4 years ago in this grant was where one of the phases of the hardening of the school entrances, some funding came from this. So in the capital projects, there's always a little bit of carryover. What we're gonna do different this year is a lot, and I'll find it before Thursday, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but directly to schools to be able to spend some of that money as they need in terms of what their safety plan and safety assessment shows. A lot of schools will use it for items such as, radios that can work within the school. Some people do it for maybe restriping their car lines or just anything associated with school safety. We did have, obviously you'll see the dates there. The dates are a little bit messed up. We got this in late, and so this is kind of an added item. It should have came on the last board agenda. But with the Safe Schools grant, there's really not much different than what we've been doing every year other than the SRO, SSO switch, and then allocating some funds directly to schools this year.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Anything, moving on from that, we'll go to the.
Tucker, may I, you probably couldn't see my light here.
Nope, sorry, Mr. Smith.
Just to ask Neely a question real quick. In partnering with community agencies, do we have protocols in place for these agencies to apply to partner with us? Can you just talk a little bit about how that works?
Absolutely. And again, some of this will be blended. We already have some partnership work in place through the city of Chattanooga. I believe there were 8 schools, Jen, if I'm correct on that we already are working with with a project. The next layer that we will be looking at, we applied for the grant, and I'm not sure if we know if we've received that grant yet or not. They were finalizing that, and then once that part is finalized, and what I mean, they are finalized. The state, it's a federal grant that we've applied to the state for. Yes, absolutely, all of that will be made clear to any partners that want to seek out working with us. Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Now moving on to the K through 12 academics officer with the Southern Regional Education Board. Yeah, Ms. Hill.
I would just like you to walk us through what that's all about, please.
So at a very, very high level, SREB is an outside source that we use that specializes in future-ready work, like pathways, certifications. A school, like I'll use it for instance, we've worked with them very closely at Sequoia. Sequoia is such a unique entity in Harrison Bay. Those are schools that are not really like any other school, that they come in and work with us. They have a review process that they use. And Ms. Hill, I'll try to also make sure, Blake, I can get much more detailed information if you need it. But SREB really helps us look at just to be quite frank, these schools are a little out of the norm for us. Like Sequoia operates so differently. It's an atypical process and program that we use.
Well,
SREB helps us with
So
that.
this is a $60,000 approval, and the memo says all county high schools will benefit from district-wide college and career readiness success for traditionally underrepresented students. It feels like it's aligned with our student success planning, but yeah, it'd be great if Blake could send us some
I need
additional
to be
information.
sure, but I know that's how we've used SREB in the past because of their unique, what they do that's unique. But let me find out more information.
Okay, moving on to our board policies that are first read. Any of those, there are a lot of them. Mr. Walker?
That's wrong.
Oh, Ms. Thurman?
Yeah, there's one of my favorites, Scott, open enrollment. I'm so glad we finally went back to what we were doing in the late 1990s. Why we ever stopped it, I'll never know. But there's a couple of questions, and I know open enrollment's one of the last ones. It's just the one I have on the top of my pile here. A couple of things, like on line 24, it says if Hamilton County School grants a transfer to a student when parent or guardian of the student is responsible for transportation. I think we need to do that to all schools personally, but that are outside your zone, like magnet schools and other schools. But anyway, it'll save us a few $million. But anyway, the student must maintain satisfactory attendance, behavior, and effort to remain in the new school. When do we notify the students? Like if they're not going to be allowed to come back the next year? Is that going to be, I know principals have always had the autonomy before. If a student is a behavior problem, they can say, you go back to your home school. And I totally agree with that. But I just wondered when we notify a parent of that, do we have to wait till the end of the semester, the end of a?
Well, so that would be an administrative procedure.
Okay.
What we're clear on is the statute says you got them for the year. Now, they're still subject to discipline, right? So the fact that they're transferred doesn't mean that you can't discipline them. But I would imagine that an administrative procedure would be in place that would lay out things like a disciplinary, a parent conference and the like. That's
I just didn't know if they'd be able to stay the whole year if they were a problem, say in the first quarter, and that the principal had to tolerate somebody out of his district. And then too, for the parent, if that child was going to be, not be able to return to that school next year, we give them enough time to make other plans. Or
well, and to be clear, the statute doesn't actually spell out that you necessarily have them for a year, but the conversation, I don't think it does, Ms. Bronson, I'm looking over at you, because we communicated about this to some extent. But the General Assembly's intent was that they stay somewhere for a year. Whether that made its way into the statute or not, I'll have to check, and I'll have that answer for you hopefully before I go to bed tonight. I'll send you and the rest of the board an answer, but I'll certainly have it by Thursday. But what I think TSBA envisions is that there'll be model administrative procedures set up where the school administration, if someone's in jeopardy of being transferred back to their school, that there be a process in place where they know about it and they see it coming. And the reason that that process needs to be in place is that if you send a kid, let's say someone was at Sail Creek, transferred to Siding, played football at Siding. If he got sent back without a bona fide change of address, then that compromises his eligibility to play at Sail Creek. So the General Assembly wanted to protect situations like that so a kid could see it coming and there weren't unintended consequences. But I'll check the answer to your question. I'll get it back to you tonight. Yeah.
okay.
So, Ms. Thurman, from just a administrative procedure, the way we've handled this in the past is kids, for example, at a magnet school, they were expected to stay at the school for the entire year. We have some things in the Code of Acceptable Behavior that are put in place to help address some of the concerns about how would parents know. For example, if a kid's suspended more than 5 days, they automatically have to have a behavior improvement plan. So that would be a touch point with a parent. The expectation is if it's in the first semester, they would get a warning, you know, written warning letter that if attendance, academics, behavior doesn't improve, your student wouldn't be allowed to come the next school year. And so we'll continue to put stuff like that in place like we have for magnet schools. But to your point, if it starts first quarter, they would stay there or in an alternative setting for the rest of the year.
Okay, and then the next line, it says Hamilton County Schools shall not deny a student who is zoned to attend or who was enrolled in a school during the previous school year enrollment and attendance in the school. Does that mean they don't have to apply every year like they do now?
Yes, ma'am.
So now they can just go on without having to go through that process every year?
That's right. Subject to good behavior
Yeah.
and discipline.
And we had already updated that for hardship transfers. Now we're broadening it, obviously, for this, okay, you get to stay at the grade band, and then, of course, when you go to the next grade band, if you want to be out of zone, then you have to apply for the new grade band.
Okay. Well, this is the way we used to do it, and why we ever stopped, I don't know. It acts like it's something new, but it's not really. But it's great, I'm glad the state finally, this is because of the state, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
This new state law. It's a shame they had to do it, and we weren't out front on that. Let's see, and these, there was one more here, and I can't remember. Oh, about the equipment. The code 3.3, and it's real funny, I was at Seal Creek and I was asked this question just Friday night. It was about, because this says all equipment, materials placed in school buildings by any group or organization becomes property of the board. So does that mean when sports boosters buy things, like lawnmowers, things like that, okay, they're on school grounds, they're property of the board, okay? Does our insurance cover them? That's what they were wanting to know, because they have had some, you know, not necessarily here recently, but they've just bought some expensive equipment, and they wanted to know if it was covered under the insurance,
I'd have to ask
since it is
finance.
property of the board.
I'd have to ask finance about that. You know, I think a lot of that would depend on our control, our inventory control. Do we register it as a
Right,
revenue?
yeah, so if we know about it.
If you know, so if a sports booster buys something, they need to notify, do we need to clarify that in here or something?
I think that's something that the finance office could communicate to the school support organizations. Any equipment that's purchased for school use needs to be included in the inventory control.
Okay.
You know, as if, for instance, sometimes a booster club would buy a gator
Right,
for use, and this is inconsistent. Sometimes it's kept locked up and it's used only at the game by the booster club, and sometimes the coach has a key to it. But that's a good question, and I think that between finance and Brad Jackson's office, I think those could be communicated to the schools.
okay, I think we need to clarify that, because the sports boosters really were really nervous about leaving some of their equipment at the school, and were afraid some of it would get stolen and didn't know what to do about getting insurance on it.
So when it's on fixed assets, I believe it's covered, but what people need to understand is that we don't kick in till $10,000. So unless it's a John Deere tractor, I mean, a little gator, we're gonna eat the $5,000 cost.
A gator's the old thing you ride around in. Like the little mini tractors.
Oh, okay.
So it's not the property of, and I apologize, not the
Okay.
property of the board if it's under $10,000?
No, it is the property, but our.
Insurance.
The liability.
No.
But who's responsible for paying the deductible?
Now, that's a really good point. So if the booster club buys it, keeps it on our property, and we're using it, then our liability applies to it. So I think this is a good conversation. So I think finance and Brad's office needs to be sure that the schools know and understand that these pieces of equipment need to be kept and maintained in good order if they're being used by our students.
Okay, well, I just think that's something we need to clarify. You get something?
You come to lock the keys up.
And lock the keys up.
Yeah,
These things
I
happen.
understand, yeah. I've known those things to happen. But anyway, I just think it's something we need to clear up and make sure that all the booster clubs and And I guess, you know, cheerleaders probably have a lot of equipment too they use and
Everybody
things
has,
like
yeah.
that, so.
Band.
And those things you would want to be board property because there's a lot of liability attached
Yeah.
to, you know, to pads and other safety equipment. If we don't keep and maintain them and know that they are up to spec or not, then, that can come back on us.
But the thing here, another thing that said here, it said that other schools could use them if you saw somewhere else they needed them, so don't be coming and getting our stuff that we just got at Sale Creek, you can't have it. But, yeah, I think some of those things just need to be cleared up so that people know what's covered and what's not. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Robinson?
Yeah, I was curious actually about the open enrollment policy. I just had one more question. How does this work with the hardship process? Does the hardship process still take place in the same time frame? Wait, did somebody already answer this?
I think Dr. Gray just left. But,
Oh, well, never mind. I can ask her later. That's no big deal.
But in practice, I mean, the board has had a policy where you go to the school of your zone unless you go to a school of choice. And so I think this is a conversation for us to have, but in large measure, the open enrollment is going to swallow
Right, that's why I'm asking.
the
Yeah.
existing hardship. Unless you have a situation where you need to transfer into a school that doesn't have a vacant seat. So the open enrollment situation only applies, let's say, Sale Creek and Soddy, we use that again. Well, let's say Soddy is at capacity and they don't have any seats available for open enrollment. But let's suppose for whatever reason, someone whose child attended school or zoned for Sale Creek needed to go to Soddy because there was a medical, or Hickson, that's probably a better example. They needed to go to a medical appointment after school, and so it would be better for them to be in Hickson, and Hickson's at capacity. In that scenario, and I've looked this off the top of my head, you can imagine a scenario
Yes.
where a school would be subject to hardship transfer even though there were no open enrollment seats.
I guess I just don't understand. I've never asked this question, even though I've dug relatively deeply into the hardship process trying to understand it. But okay, so if a school is at capacity, we still have the ability to create a hardship spot at that school because
And
I don't
can't
understand
speak
that.
for- Well, I can't speak for Dr. Drake, but when you're dealing with a situation where there's an equity issue and you need to fix it, you need to fix it. So let's,
Okay.
let's, that's probably the best way I can put it.
Okay, I can ask her more about it. Thanks.
Both policies are tools.
Yeah, but to
Not-
your point, just the open enrollment may swallow the
4 times
hardship.
out of 5, the open enrollment policy is going to swallow every other consideration.
Yeah.
But I can't sit here and tell you that your hardship policy is now defunct, because I can imagine situations where the administration might think it's appropriate to make room for a child who, either because of a medical hardship or because of some other consideration, needs to be somewhere else.
Yeah, I'd also be interested to know how many schools actually have open spots or open seats after that open enrollment process that are not currently open enrollment schools. Do we really have many schools that actually have capacity for more students? I'm just curious, how effective is this policy really going to be? So.
Well, we are gonna have plenty of schools that have seats. What do we think it's gonna be 50 or 60 schools, right? We're doing that analysis.
Okay.
However, to your point, we've talked to principals and gotten feedback from principals advisory and teachers cabinet. The bigger question will be how many people can take advantage of this without transportation, right? So schools aren't really expecting a lot of movement in the same way that we opened up seats for future-ready institutes.
Right.
In the absence of being able to provide transportation all over, you only get the families that can actually drive their
Okay.
children
Okay.
or carpool. So we'll see, but
Okay.
there will be lots of schools who have seats here.
Okay.
We have to add 2 policies to our agenda. Oh,
That's all right. I just was, she was talking about hardship. I've known of parents that wanted to get their child away from someone who was bullying them, or sometimes there were girls hanging out with guys that their parents didn't want them to, and they wanted them to go to another school on the other side of town, and they were willing to take them. So there's lots of reasons for hardships other than just open enrollment. So something we need to always keep in mind.
Both policies are applied.
Yeah.
Awesome. We have to add these 2 policies to our agenda. Policy 6.600, student records, and 6.601. You'll have the proposed revisions and additions at your seat, and you can look over those.
Scott, do you want to speak to why these are first and final read? Just to make sure that people understand.
Sure. So, thank you, Dr. Towns. So, my recommendation is that this be first and final read for a couple of reasons. There was a records request that was really well aimed, and it found a gap in law and policy. State law provides that student records are confidential. That same state law doesn't say anything at all about parents or guardians' records. There's also a corresponding provision of federal law, federal regulations that talk about directory information, which allows schools in the course of just their daily business to make records available for the convenience of their school community. Now, the federal government doesn't assume that we're subject to FOIA, it's just a convenience, right? So we can produce directory information of all sorts. We can let parents know about commercial opportunities for yearbooks or class rings or whatever else. We can produce directories. There is a tremendous amount of directory information that we use all day, every day. State law says we don't have to produce any of that. But once we produce that information and we have that repository there, what do we do with it? Well, this is the conversation that TSBA has had for years. Now, our board policy is the TSBA model policy that defines directory information as broadly as the federal government does. But TSBA has always said, if you adopt the broadest definition, then you open the door where people can get this information. If it's out there to be had, it can be gotten. I'm not sure that was good grammar, but you understand what I'm saying. And so what I have proposed here is it's more than a patch, but it's not the best fix. The best fix is we adopt this policy to define directory information and how it can be used, which is consistent with federal law. And there's some argument that if we do that, we fix the problem. I'm more of a belt and suspenders kind of guy. I'm encouraging TSBA and the Department of Education to get behind a change to the open records law so that it says explicitly that student records and parent records are confidential and that there can be limited sharing of that information pursuant to a local board policy. So all that said, because we don't want this to happen again, I think that whatever we adopt Thursday needs to be adopted first read, we fix it. And if I have to come back and tweak it in November, I'll be happy to do that and tell you I'll tweak it in November. But my recommendation is let's fix it now, and if we need to fine tune it, we certainly can. I expect that TSBA is going to get behind a change to the statute this legislative session, and when they do, we'll certainly change the policy again.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. So those will be added to our policy section. And then we have board policies under Chief Talent Officer. Any questions about service animals in district facilities?
Hey, Brad.
Okay. Yep. Ms. Thurman.
I don't have anything about that, but I've been looking for the policy that I printed off. It says something about the NSBA, the TSBA and the NSBA in one of these policies. I thought I ran it off, but I can't find it, and I can't remember which policy it was. But I just wanted to ask Scott, which policy is that?
So 1.105.
1.105, okay. I thought I ran it off, and I can't find it. But anyway, Scott, I wanted to ask you, it said something about, read that part about the NSBA right there, because I don't have it.
It's just being deleted. Any references to the National School Board Association is being deleted throughout because
Okay.
TSBA is no longer going to be a member of the NSBA.
Okay, that's what, okay. I just wondered why that was taken off and why, because I was going to recommend it be taken off, but it's, okay,
Yeah,
but they did, okay.
effective so historically, if you've been a member of TSBA, you're a member of NSBA.
Right.
This year, or last year, the Board of Delegates disassociated with the National School Board Association.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
I think the one that you're referencing is 1.104. That's the one where it's actually getting taken out.
Yeah.
The other one, we found it in 1.105.
Right,
but
okay.
We'll get that corrected.
Get that
as
out,
well.
okay.
So Ms. Ford made a good point. So for the record
Yeah.
tonight, there's going to be another edit.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Thurman.
Yeah.
1105 at line 19. there's a reference to NSBA that will come out.
Okay.
And your updated agenda will reflect that.
I just couldn't find mine. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Jones?
I guess this is more of a question for Scott, because I never got an answer back from Tammy Grissom or Joe about this, when all this happened. Does TSBA, or have they said if they plan to accommodate the state school boards in Tennessee that would have liked to utilize some of the benefits that were in NSBA that we no longer have just being in TSBA?
I don't know the answer to that. That would be something you would need to direct to Tammy.
And she didn't answer me. I've emailed her 3 times.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, except that I'm sure that NSBA would make some things available to either individual school board members around the nation or individual school boards for a cost. I don't know what that would be. Or it
Yeah,
may be
they did.
business.
I went to the CUBE conference, but I had to pay for it.
And so I don't know if there was maybe an additional cost because you're not with an affiliated state. I know that I'm a member of the National Council of School Attorneys. They have maintained the same costs even though TSBA is no longer affiliated. So I would hate to see it. It depends, but the truth of the matter is I don't. That's a member benefit issue, and I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, moving on into our Chief Talent Officer. Any questions about insurance? We went through that presentation. Board matters, anything on that, the bus depot, pump station, easement, or the architect selection for Tyner? Ms. Hill?
When I initially heard about the possibility of using the space behind CCA for a bus, that made good sense to me. Until I saw that you think it's going to cost $1 million. So help me understand why it's worth $1 million to spend to park our buses there, and what that does to our ability to have choices in the future. I mean, that's sunk cost.
So it's up to $1 million. We don't know the exact cost yet, and we've got to go through and bid it out and see how much grading work is necessary. We don't know, since that Head Start site was torn down, if the drainage is still proper and things like that. So it's up to $1 million. The reason we put that on there is every option that we have looked at in the past has exceeded $1 million. And so even if it goes up to $1 million, I think it's a good use of that property. You know, some of the couple issues we've had there lately, so it cleans that property up. It puts a presence on that property on a consistent basis, and it doesn't alter that property much, so that if we did have future use for it, it's not like we're putting a building. We're basically putting parking lot, redoing the grading, redoing the drainage. The only structure that would be on there would basically be one of our portables that would serve as an office space. And then, of course, part of the expense is going to be the fencing that's necessary for security of that site. So saying up to $1 million, we don't know the exact price. Of course, when we get a bid, that will have to come back, you know, for approval of that contract. But with that said, I think the reason it's a good use is because the facility meets the needs of it. It cleans that area up, and it's going to be cheaper than what we have looked at in the past.
And how many buses will be able to be parked there?
So right now at Hickson, I believe that there are 18 large buses and approximately 12 smaller buses. So
Okay.
we're looking somewhere between 30 and 40 on that site.
Okay. And at one point, we were discussing offering a stipend annually to the school that accepted.
We've
this-
been paying that to Hickson.
And so that would now move to CCA?
That's the board's pleasure.
I mean, I didn't think it was a good idea in the first place, but we've offered it nonetheless, and now it's coming to the back door of my school.
Yeah. the board's
How much
pleasure.
money has Hickson been paid?
$7,500 a semester.
A semester? Okay.
Ain't gonna park them in my house. For $7,500.
Yeah, I am in no way belittling my colleagues' frustration with this situation. But $1 million, I've always questioned like the value of moving them and $1 million to store them, but you've got to park a bus somewhere, so. Thanks
And
for
I
those
think again,
answers.
one of the challenges in us finding a location is the need for it to really be north of the river. You know, we looked at several places that were south of the river. We looked at Hillcrest, for example, and thought that was a good location. Taking transportation, they're like, there is one wreck on the dam.
Yeah.
Everything is.
Well, and you know, I brought up the stipend, but really, I will finish that thought. I have never been in support really of that stipend. I mean, we haven't ever really voted on it, but I philosophically, I have trouble with it because I feel like it's not an individual school's land. It's our school district's land for us to do with what we will choose. And I have seen in my own schools a little bit of, and in the Rock Point learning community, some territory disputes, you know, that are not healthy for the system overall. So, so I won't push the issue on the stipend. Because, you know, they are our system's buses and they drive our students around, so.
Ms. Thurman.
I was gonna ask Joe, what's it worth to you to get rid of them? Over $1 million.
Yeah, I can tell you that little 7,500 per semester, you probably spend that much in expense and having to redo parking lots, and it's hard. It's hard on the property. And
Okay, and let me ask one more question. You're talking about the area up behind the school that there's nothing there. Now, I know we have, I don't know how many acres we have there. We have a lot of property up there on the hill.
CCA, until you get out and walk it, it's a weird property.
Yeah.
There is a lot back behind the hill that,
Right.
you know, there's actually some old tennis courts
Right.
that, you know, probably haven't been touched in 30 years, but then there's a significant drop behind it. And there used to be a Head Start program, I believe
Right.
it's on Hamilton Road, so it's where that Head Start
Okay.
program used to be.
And it was a practice field for football. There's actually a paved sidewalk that goes,
Yeah.
the students used to use it.
Okay,
So I think
so it's, what I'm getting at, they actually don't have to go through the school parking lot to
No.
get there?
No.
It's
Not
at all.
completely and
No,
totally,
it's a good-
okay.
it's a good
That's why,
choice.
it's a little bit different situation than at Hickson. But also, I think that would be great for that school, because I know they've had a lot of problems behind that school. I think if you clear it up and put a fence around it, I think that would be great for the school, actually. Give a little bit more security up there on that hill. I really do. I think it would
There's
probably be a good
actually
thing.
a lot of potential for the whole back side
Yeah.
of that property.
Yeah, okay.
That tennis court, walk it, and or the programming at CCA, great place for an amphitheater
Yeah.
or something.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure
Learn
I
a
knew.
lot just finding the property.
I know where that Head Start program used to be, but I didn't think it went through the school in any way. Okay, all right, thanks.
Mr. Smith.
I was just going to add, over the past, you know, I've cried about this for 4 years now, and I don't know how many sites that I've been with Justin and looked at places and priced places, and it hadn't been easy to find a place. It just hadn't. And so I think now for the first time we're on to something that's doable. And, you know, I'm praying the cost will come in much less than that. But I do know that, you know, Hickson High School is the only school in the system that does ag programming and has an award-winning ag program that have for years wanted to enlarge that ag program. But they need that space to be able to do that. So I think $1 million is a good investment. So thank you, Justin.
Anything else under board matters? The Franklin Middle School property deed restrictions. Do you want to give a quick update on that, Mr. Bennett?
Sure. So the board will recall back in June, the board lifted the deed restriction on that property to allow for a public charter school to operate. The lender that is contemplating underwriting the purchase and the renovation of the property has said that that restriction makes it still too restrictive for them to want to lend money. Their thought is, in the event of a default, they wouldn't be able to foreclose and get out of the property what they need, because effectively no one will be interested in the property except for another public charter school. So I've had several conversations with the lender's attorney, and so we developed some language that, if the board is comfortable with it, creates a situation where in the event the school were to default, what would happen would be the lender would approach the board and say, okay, this is what's owed on the property. Do you want to buy it for the price that's still there? Or do you want to try to find another charter school that can slide in and assume the lease? And the reason for that stipulation is, from what I understand from Dr. Towns and her team, is that Howard is really, it's at capacity.
Right.
And I think every forecast is it's going to continue to be at capacity. And so there's a public interest in having a school down there in some way, shape, or form, whether it's operated by the current school, whether it's operated by the board or a successor charter school. Somebody needs to be in there filling a market gap. And so in discussions with the lender's attorney, this struck us as a reasonable balance between what has been historically the board's interest in wanting to, not to subsidize someone coming in and using public property or property that had been purchased with public funds for private gain, and I'll come back to that in just a second, versus the need to solve this problem. And I understand that there are at least a couple of board members who may think maybe it's time to do away with that historical restriction, and if that's the case, then that's fine. I don't know that we need to have that conversation today. This proposal fixes the lender's concerns, and it opens the door for the charter school to operate in this location.
Ms. Thurman.
I think that's probably a good compromise. That way it keeps the building, like you say, to fill that void. And then if the charter school, for whatever reason, has to default, we still have a school in that area, because we're not going to be able to find any more property down there. I remember when they were going to, build Howard a new school at one point. I know Curtis Adams looked and looked and looked for I finally found, I think, one piece of property, and you know how many years ago that's been. And so that part of property down there is getting harder and harder to find, to get your hands on. So I think that's probably about as good a compromise as we're going to get.
The barrier, no, the initial, and I kind of got ahead of myself for the sake of trying to shorten time. One of the initial barriers was that the proposal had the parties talking about this, so it was the lender, the school, and the school board discussing the price, and that's been resolved. So it's the lender and the board. Assuming the school board to default, they drop out of the equation, and it's a conversation the board has with the lender. Another thing that is at play now too is, rather than it being the full price, which for various reasons, given the amount of money that's being bought, and the loan-to-value ratio, I was concerned that would be a little unpalatable for the board. We would negotiate a price. Okay. So I think the appraised value of the property is somewhere around $5 million. I think the loan amount is $6.2 million. So you can immediately do the math. The board could actually declare eminent domain on that property for cheaper than what the loan value is. I'm not suggesting you do that. Yeah. I'm suggesting that the board would not buy a piece of property for $6.2 million when it's worth $5 million, right? So discussing this with the lender, we found some opportunities to protect the board's long-term interest, so that yes, there can be a school down there. It really gives everyone the best chance to move forward, and the charter school has the opportunity to be successful, to make the loan payments. And, you know, hopefully if things work out, they can get the loan redone in a few years and move forward.
Okay, moving on, we'll just have our events and announcements report cards on the 22nd of this month with parent-teacher conferences, the 25th through the 19th of November, board agenda session on November 8th, and then we will have a remote day, learning day on November 10th. Also, the county commission's having a redistricting meeting this Wednesday at the county courthouse in the commission room directly after the county commission meeting. With that, that's all of our agenda, and we will move into our policy meeting, and I will hand it over to Ms. Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, guys, we wanted to bring back the appearances before the board policy that we had tabled a month or so ago, and take a few minutes to talk through why we're changing this and what needs to be changed about it to make it a better policy for everybody. So to get us started, Scott, I would appreciate it if you could briefly explain to us why this policy actually was coming before us in the first place. There was a slight change that you said was to keep us in compliance. Can you please clarify what that is?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Hill. So there actually were two reasons that put it on my radar screen. The first reason is that there was a Supreme Court decision that in essence says when someone is speaking at a public meeting, they have the floor. And to the extent that you might put in place things like you can't talk about individual employees, or you can't talk about controversial subjects, etc., that is viewpoint discrimination, and so those kinds of restrictions are invalid. What that effectively does is when someone has the microphone, I don't mean this pejoratively, it's open mic night. They have the floor, they can talk about whatever they want to talk about within the application of the policy. So the board could restrict comments to things that are explicitly on the agenda. But then once you're speaking on matters about the agenda, you can't restrict the speaker on the basis of, well, you can't mention employees. You can't do that. Well, you can't go into something talking, you know, that's controversial. Within the ambit of what they're allowed to talk about, they can say virtually anything as long as they're not obscene or disruptive.
So the one thing that would change really is a procedural, which is our statement that the vice chair gives. It actually, there's not any required change to this policy.
That's correct. And we've already changed the vice chair's statement so that the vice chair's statement is now in compliance with the Supreme Court decision.
Okay.
So we're good with that.
Okay.
So based upon my having made or changed that statement and shared it with former Chairman Wingate and explained, here's why we need to change this. It was Mr. Wingate's suggestion that the board needed to look at the policy and decide in that moment, well, okay, if people can really talk about anything that they want and there are literally no restrictions whatsoever, do we need to talk about whether we need to put some kind of parameters? So it was in those two things, boom, boom, that this draft was born.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that refresher on the background. So, board, I raise the question to you. Do we want to limit the subjects of what people can talk to us about? No one feels strongly that we want to tell people what they're not allowed to say to us, it looks like.
I mean, can I do that? Do you want to go?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I mean, if we're just asking that, I would not necessarily. I think it's, there can be subjects that are brought up that would not, we would not become aware of were we not to give people the opportunity to
Mhm.
speak to us, and that's my big concern is, would I be okay with, we talked at one point about having 2 opportunities for people to speak to the board, one that would be more open, one that for the board meeting's sake would keep to the agenda. I'd be open for that, but I would want an opportunity for people to be able to speak to us on some subject that never would have crossed our mind.
Just to help you all understand where I'm headed, I'm just gonna try to walk us through a series of how much do we need to change this policy? Because we went to a wholesale rewrite of this policy, but may not actually be necessary. So, Rhonda, you look like you've.
Yeah, well, I'm with Martha on this. I just don't, I know there was a lady at our church one time, she'd never been to church before, and she cussed her children out at church. And the deacons went to her and said, you can't use those words in church. And she said, can you make me a list of words I can't say? And I thought, wow, what would that list look like from a bunch of deacons and elders? So I don't think we need to be telling people what they can't say.
Okay.
I think that would just be, where
Yeah.
would the list end? I just don't think that's wise. I mean, what are we trying to protect? Are we trying to protect us? I mean, it doesn't bother me for people to say whatever they want to say. I just don't understand what we're trying to protect by putting all these parameters around it. I agree with Marco on this.
Kritza, did you have something to add?
No, I was just gonna say, I felt like limiting what someone said is kind of like censoring them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just not really comfortable with that because, like Marco was saying, and Rhonda, some things you never know until you hear them from the public.
Joe, do you have anything to add about about that particular question?
No, I
Okay,
agree
okay.
with what's been said, but I do particularly like on page 2, line 20, that verbiage there where we can engage that presenter. I do like that. We haven't been able to do that in the past.
Well, that actually isn't, it's not part of the policy that we're not allowed to talk to people in the existing policy.
Well, yeah, but we never have, so maybe I just
That's been
assumed
more, I think, just
that that
decorum.
was,
I think just been practice. I don't
Yeah,
think it's
but
in
we're
the
the board, we can,
Okay, that's good to know.
Scott always tells us we can do what we want.
Like the front door, the back
Right,
door.
seemingly, people come up and they share what they want to share, and then they go sit down. The next one comes up, and there's no dialogue between us and that person. So I'm, for one, glad to know that, hey, I want to ask you a question. I'm glad to know that I
Yeah,
can do that.
we've actually done that since I've been on the board.
Yeah.
And one of my very first meetings, I remember, Joe, actually, a mother came and her kindergartner had been dropped off at the wrong bus stop, and I remember you stopping and talking with her and how much that impacted me.
Well,
So-
you're younger than I am, because I don't remember.
Okay, so that's a problem that we actually don't have to solve for, I don't think, with this policy. Chairman, you look like you've got something you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Mr. Perez that I think breaking it out into having a public appearance on Monday and then on Thursday, the public appearance be pertaining to the actual agenda for efficiency's sake on Thursday, so we can get to official business is probably best practice, but then open it up on Monday as well. And then that way we can hear concerns and give people all the time, or as many people as that want to speak to the board, the opportunity to, and give them their 5 minutes. I think that's our number one job, is to listen to the people, whether they call us, email us, or if we're sitting up here and they're standing at that microphone. It's our job. But I think I would like to see us have a public comment on Monday, and then anything on Thursday needs to be pertaining to the agenda, just for efficiency's sake.
Well, I guess for me, I want us to be able to do our work well, and that certainly requires us being informed. If we're going to have 2 public comments, I think it's important that we look at the order of our meeting. So perhaps public comment, well, the order and the quantity. So right now we have within our policy that on the day of the board meeting, we would have up to 5 speakers that have 3 minutes, or that 3 speakers that have 5 minutes each, excuse me. I don't think but we don't have a limit on the number of people if they email ahead of time. But we do have a statement that groups have to combine their speaker time. We saw that kind of loopholed somehow a few months ago when we had 75 minutes of public comment in the middle of a meeting. So I would like us to think about the order of the meeting, and if we're going to open up to anybody that can talk for as long as they want, that we put that at the end.
Well, within 5 minutes, they still get
Right,
5
well,
minutes.
or currently they get 5 minutes. So it can go 6 minutes, it can go 6 hours, and that would be up to the chair to call the meeting then.
Which meeting are you speaking of? You're talking about the agenda session? Or
Well,
you're
so-
talking about, because if you're talking about the regular board meeting, it doesn't do any good to have the delegates at the end because you've already
Right.
voted on what they were going
Yeah, but
to
so,
talk about.
so the way our policy is written right now, we don't actually say when we're gonna have the public comment.
Correct.
So in this draft that we're looking at, we have some more parameters on how many people we will allow to speak on any given day, which I think is useful in terms of actually getting our work accomplished. And so I might suggest that if we're going to have comment at a work session, at an agenda meeting, that those comments go at the end of our agenda session. And then on our Thursday meeting, we have a much more finite number of speakers that we will welcome to the agenda meeting, because they could also attend the voting meeting. All my words are getting mixed up.
Business
I'm sorry.
meeting.
The business meeting, thank you. So that we know, okay, we need to plan for up to 25 minutes of public comment prior to moving into our voting items. So that those speakers so that would be the equivalent of 5 people speaking for 5 minutes, or does 3 go into 25? I don't know. I'm kind of advocating, honestly, I would advocate for a 3-minute. We see that other elected bodies are using that. We use that on city council, and people are able to say a lot without getting off topic. And I think those 2 extra minutes could better serve another person having the opportunity to speak, and let people be more concise. So I support what my colleague, Mr. Smith, had suggested about that.
Can I say another thing? You said, I know we talked about speakers speaking on the same topic, but just because you speak on the same topic doesn't mean you necessarily agree with each other. I mean, it may be 2 totally different people speaking on the same topic, and one may not even know who the other one is, but we can't say you can't speak because this lady over here spoke about something that you want to speak about.
That's true.
You can't do that.
It's specific to the group.
Well, I know, but she's talking.
It's specific to the group is the way that the policies are written.
Yeah.
So what we saw happen with that was, for example, when we were looking at the budget, and teacher organizations were told they needed to have 1 person represent them to speak about support for the budget rather than 9 people, where we had an organization, Moms for Liberty, was here, and they had 9 people speaking about basically all the same thing, just different parts of the curriculum, but it was.
No, they all told something very different. But can you limit them like that? I mean, if you're going to open it up, like you said, if you're going to open it up, how big is it open up?
So you can limit it as long as the restrictions are business driven, which is one of the reasons we call this the business meeting.
But I'm talking about the agenda session. Can anybody speak for anything? But you're just talking about, because those kind of.
Well, I don't, maybe I misunderstood Ms. Hill. but I don't think we're talking about those restrictions at the agenda session. I think we're talking about those at the business meeting. And one of the reasons that you can do some restrictions at the business meeting to allow for the flow of the business is that the board meets in the public, but it's not a meeting of the public. So what boards tend to do is they tend to restrict, when they restrict, not every board does this, but when they restrict, they tend to restrict to items that are on the agenda that board members think will help inform their decision on the items that are about to come before the board. And so that's what I tried to do. To Ms. Hill's earlier point, you don't necessarily have to do anything, but if you want, if you want to give an opportunity for wide open comment when someone feels the need to, you have an agenda session, which I think is a great avenue for the board to do just that. If you want to give someone an opportunity to speak before the board votes, then I think this process does that too. But this may be a solution in search of a problem. And so I just have to, it's the pleasure of the board.
Yeah, I do question or ask the question of you, my colleagues, is our current policy broken?
I'll speak for myself. Hey, we were all here during that long session. I personally think in my year here, that was an exception. But I serve the community, and I'm not saying any others would not agree with that, but for me, you know, I think of the city council when city council had, I think about a year and a half ago, people till midnight or 1 o'clock or later addressing the city council, and it was intentional. It was that itself was a statement that, you know, and so I'm fine with what we are. I'm also fine if we were to split it to keep Thursday to business and Monday becomes the night that maybe will go longer because we will hear more people, and especially if we want to interact with some of the comments, then we're doubling the time. So I'm okay either one. I just want to know that, I want the public to know that they have the space to communicate with the board either Monday or Thursday, or like right now, Monday nobody speaks, because we don't have that scheduled in. So if we add that in on Monday, and then we say Thursday is just business, and I'm okay with that. But
Jeannie, okay, this is for the appearances before the board at the business meeting. Do we need two different
Well,
policies?
that's
or
my
just
question.
Add to this policy if we're going to do it at
that's
the,
what she was saying.
at the
Yeah,
agenda
that's,
session?
so,
Yeah.
so this is our,
So I started to say.
So
yeah.
this one do.
This is our current
for the-
policy, this one short
Yeah,
one
for the
pager.
That's what I'm sort of saying.
This one do for the agenda.
At the board meeting, like I put at the business meeting, and then one for the, do we need two different policies for,
Well, so
Two
so I-
different-
That's the question at hand, is do
I mean, do we need
because
this
we've
one
added them.
plus another one? I'm saying leave this one like it is and then add another one for the agenda session.
which is with this one.
if you were going to do that, Ms. Thurman, I don't know that you need to change anything.
Okay.
So I mean, your current policy is wide open. Of course, I mean, again, pleasure of the board. If you want to add public comment to your agenda session, you can.
Because a lot would change because, would you have to give a 3-day notice to speak at the agenda session? Would
So-
you have to show up 30 minutes early to sign up?
So
Is it gonna be follow the same rules? I mean, I don't know.
No, because on this right here, it says, let me make sure I'm understanding, because y'all using different words. So our business meeting is our Thursday meeting, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That's right.
Okay. So no, because if you could look at this draft, this right here would have been our business meeting.
Right, right.
Well, they took out the people that could, that was removed where people could come in and sign up 30 minutes prior to, for that meeting, ma'am. This policy eliminates that. And they only put it in right here under the regular agenda section, which is today's meeting.
Ms. Hill, if I could make an observation, if you look at your current policy, the one-page policy, if you look at lines 1 through 19, there's really no purpose for that anymore. So back in the day, the board limited comments to folks who called ahead 3 days in advance. Several years ago, back in 15, the board decided that was too restrictive.
That was me. That's why I'm really passionate about this.
Well, it was also great marketing.
Yeah.
But the board decided that was too restrictive, and so the board added 21 through 26. So basically, people can sign up ahead of time and come speak. They don't have to call ahead. So if you think about it, there's really almost no reason whatsoever to have 10 through 14 in there, nor is there a reason to have 16 through 19 under your current practice, because the rest of the policy kind of makes it superfluous.
Well, except that we don't want to create a space race or an Apple release or whatever where only 3 people get a spot and everybody's standing in line on Thursday
That's
morning.
true.
I mean, and that creates an equity problem, I think.
And ideally, people come and they want to present to the board things that are concerning to them. Ideally, they would let Ms. Ford know ahead of time. They'd have documents that could be shared with the board so that you could review these documents, and so you could listen intelligently to what someone has to say. I think that's why we kept that in there, but in application, I really don't know that that's ever been done.
So I asked the question again, do we actually need a new policy? Do we want to have any separation of, because if this policy stands, our current policy, it can be applied to any day that we decide to put it on the agenda. So if Chairman McClendon were to say, all right, we're going to have a public comment on agenda sessions from here on out, then it would just follow these same rules, right? The difference would be then, oh my gosh, what is happening? The question comes in, do we want to, number one, do we want to add a second set of public comment on agenda meeting day? And if so, do we want to make Thursdays only apply to the agenda topics? So Chairman McClendon has shared his feelings. Does anybody else have any strong feelings that we'd like Scott to write up for us?
Today I was with a group that this came up, as I recall, and somebody in that group made the comment. Help me, Tucker, if I say this wrong, because you were there. Somebody in that group made the comment that they come to school board meetings because they want to be engaged and involved, and our room is so limited in its space that they can never get in. Somebody said that today, didn't they? And we need to hear from everybody. Now, a couple of months ago, I suggested that we go from 5 minutes to 3 minutes, and I got blown up, a lot of criticism. But it wasn't because I don't want to hear from people. It's because I do want to hear from people, tons of people. And I want everybody to have a chance. And because of our space and because of the way it's set up now, and because we have other business that we have to attend to, we don't have a good format to really hear from the community. And then a few weeks ago, we got some information on stuff that's in our libraries that I would have had no idea that it was there had we not heard from some parents that are engaged. So I like the idea of people being able to come on Monday nights. I like that. And then limiting the ones on Thursday nights that's pertinent to the information we're going to act on. If we're not going to do that, then I would suggest maybe what was suggested today at that meeting I was at today, that we carve out, and people are gonna love this idea probably, but we carve out maybe one night a month or one night every 2 months or something to meet in a stadium somewhere, or I think you used to go to Tyner High School, I think, Rhonda.
Yeah, we used to meet in the auditorium there.
Yeah,
But it was
we're-
just too much for these guys to set up. and
Yeah, I
everything.
get,
Logistics
I
not
get
there,
that, but we're living in a day where we want parents to get involved. I mean, we've all said that, and we're living in a day where we need them to be involved, and more are getting involved. I think, at least in my schools, PTA meetings are packed now when you go to those, and that's what we want. So we need to figure out some kind of way to hear from as many as we can without, making us neglect the other business that we have to act on. So I like that idea, Mr. Chairman, about perhaps letting them come on Monday and then carving out Thursday for the ones that are pertinent to whatever actions we're going to be taking at that business meeting. That would be my thoughts.
Ms. Hill?
Have we ever thought about
Wait, we're gonna let Tucker.
rearranging this room? I mean, to me, there's a lot of wasted space. I know because of COVID, you have to spread everybody out a little bit, so that's why we can't get as many people. Do what? Yeah, I started saying we may have 2 more seats up here, you understand? No, yeah. So, no, but I mean, we can arrange,
You can go out,
put
though.
these guys out and put some chairs in the middle. I mean, there's a way to make more space in here. if we have
Our
to.
lights are very mobile.
Yeah, that's right.
We travel.
We go wherever.
Chairman McClendon had something you wanted to add.
I think we might be slightly overcomplicating this.
Yes.
On
I think so.
on Thursday, we basically keep it the same, except anything you're speaking on needs to be on the agenda. And then on Monday, probably do a sign up before the meeting, 30 minutes before the meeting. We don't limit the amount of people. I think that defeats the whole purpose of opening up a second night if you're just going to limit it to 5 people again. And it's at the end of we go through our agenda session, it's at the meeting. If we have 5 people show up, we have 5 people. If we have 20, we have 20. And then I'm indifferent on the 3 to 5 minutes. It doesn't, it doesn't totally matter to me. That's pleasure of the board. But I think this is probably a pretty simple fix to make it a more efficient and more open and accessible to the public.
And another thing that's great about putting that at the end that I just thought of now is that then the agenda session work is finished. So then after public comment's done, you're very quick. It's very easy to get connected with the person you need to talk to. Hey, you should talk to Justin about that. Hey, you should talk to Neely. You should talk to me. Whatever it might be. That could be very useful. So it sounds like we've got a plan. I think Scott's got it all on video to be able to get it all typed up for us. With one final exception that Joe and I both would like to see it be switched to 3 minutes and more people. Obviously, we're taking the cap off for Mondays, but to be able to make it instead of the first 3, to make it the first 5, but everybody gets 3 minutes to speak instead. So more people are able to speak on Thursdays. Is that something y'all want to think about?
I got confused on that last one, because you said we're taking a cap off and then 3 instead of 5.
Okay, so our policy for our business meeting is that people can email and ask to be on the agenda. And then also that we will take the first 3 people. Okay,
That sign up.
that sign up.
But-
So that alone right there is 15 minutes. And what Joe and I are saying is if we were to make that 3 minutes, that allows 2 more people to get on the list. So if all of our public comment became 3 minutes, everybody gets to hear more people, whether there's a limit to the number of speakers or
But
not.
Jenny, if you email, there's no limit. If you email
If
3
you
days
email,
ahead,
there's
there's
no
no
limit.
limit.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right,
if
and-
everybody emails, there's no limit.
Yeah, and there was a limit suggested within one of these documents. It was like 8 people or.
How much time do you get at county
Yeah,
commission
the
meetings?
total amount of time was limited, it was somewhere in here.
I know she said city council, county commission is 3.
I mean, it creates consistency. I'm fine with 5 minutes, but
What
I
do you
agree
think,
it
Rick?
creates consistency.
I think it's 3.
Yeah, I think the,
Same
the
amount
more,
of
the simpler,
councils, 3
simpler we
minutes,
make it,
so
the easier it'll be for people to understand.
I'm okay with that.
Right, yeah.
All right, can you tighten that up for us, Scott?
I could try to. I thought I was tracking with you until just a minute ago.
Well, I can get with you
Yeah,
afterwards.
so I think that's what we're gonna
Yeah,
need to do.
it's late, we all need to go eat dinner. That's
So-
all.
So county commission's 3 minutes, city council's 3 minutes.
I can't speak to county commission, but city council is 3.
I'm pretty sure it's 3 minutes. Yeah.
And actually, city council, the chairman keeps a very tight, parameters on what is allowed to be said. You can come and talk about anything, but you cannot call out an employee.
And that's.
That is
That will change, because if,
You can't call on a student.
we can't
Yeah, we
mention
can still
students.
restrict comments on students,
Yeah.
but other than that, it's quite open.
It's frightening precedent when you think about the slander cases that could come from that afterward, but, all right, thank you, Chair.
Awesome. Well, that's it. We'll adjourn.